to say on behalf of Alberta Regional Professional Development Consortium, I'd like to extend our deepest appreciation and respect to our Elder Advisory Circle, who helped guide this project and bring it to fruition. Thank you to Elders Tina Fox, Betty Latang, and Eulalia Running Rabbit. Your dedication to education is a tremendous act of reconciliation. We can only hope to bring as much awareness and truth as possible to this day. I would also like to thank our friends and colleagues, Donna Ross and Barbara Deskin, for their huge contribution to this project. Donna Ross had these words about this day. Orange Shirt Day and the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is a day that remembers the thousands of Indigenous children who attended residential schools and the children who did not make it home. As part of the learning of the impact of residential schools, Orange Shirt Day and Beyond guides an approach to share the true history with educators, students, and school communities. It is a time of remembrance and reflection about the impact it continues to have on many Indigenous people. Our Orange Shirt Day and Beyond resources honor, respect, and foster ways to learn about the legacies of residential schools, but also commemorate Indigenous ways of knowing, doing, relating, and being by promoting positive stories of hope and resiliency. The guidance of our Elder Advisory Circle has prompted a decolonization framework to share a deepening perspective as their own personal stories of painful memories are shared. In turn, they recommended ways in which we should teach about these important discussions about residential schools and beyond. And the Phyllis Webstad story is to explain to everyone how the Day for National Truth and Reconciliation is also referred to as Orange Shirt Day, because every child matters. So today, I've noticed that we have some classes on our list that I recognize names, and I welcome you back, and I'm thrilled to see that you're here with us again today. Our knowledge keeper, who will be sharing with us today, is none other than Jason Big Charles, who's been with us all week. And I can't express my gratitude to you, Jason, for the sharing and the knowledge and everything you have offered to us this week. And I am just thrilled to spend the morning with you and to hear some stories, and I will pass it over to you to introduce yourself.
Pinanas kumtin Madeline na Tantaka Kyo Wapastem Sika Sun Jason Big Charles Pneumonia Sika Sut East Perio Chania. So my name is Whitehorse. My colonized name is Jason Big Charles. I am coming to you today live from the East Perry Métis settlement in northern Alberta, where I've lived my entire life, living off the land and carrying on the teachings of my ancestors and trying to keep that alive. It's been a wonderful journey this week. It's been a great honor to be asked on this journey toward reconciliation with all of the participants throughout the week. Those that are just joining us, welcome. Those that have been with us throughout the week on this journey, welcome back. It's been an uplifting week, more so I think for the knowledge keepers that have been welcomed in, because as knowledge holders, that is our primary role within our culture, is to carry that knowledge and to pass it on. It's very uplifting that you're all here to take that knowledge and carry it on, because you've helped us as knowledge holders to fulfill the obligation we have to keep the culture alive. So it's been a great journey towards reconciliation. And it's very fitting that with today's celebration, we are celebrating storytelling, because in my teachings and in all my years of being taught, the oral tradition of storytelling has been the foundation of our Nihio culture, or our Indigenous culture. because it's only through our oral tradition and mainly our storytelling that our teachings and our culture stays alive. There are literally thousands and thousands of different stories and legends that come from within the indigenous cultures and nations throughout Canada and the Americas. And the one thing, the more and more stories that I've learned that were passed to me, it always amazes me the similarities of the stories from miles and nations apart throughout our great country. Because the stories that were passed down to me, I could see the similarities to stories from the East Coast and stories from the West Coast. So it shows to me the deep connection that all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people have through the storytelling and the sharing of stories. So before I share some of my stories with you, we have a short video to show you that talks about storytelling and the importance of that oral tradition.
The oral tradition of storytelling is the oldest of all of our traditions. Long before the flute, the rattle, and even the drum, there were storytellers. And unlike today, those storytellers were not thought of as just entertainers. They were teachers and historians. Having no written language, it was storytelling that preserved our legends, our history, and much of our culture. But storytelling was also used as a method of teaching the young ones, and sometimes reminding the not-so-young ones how to live in a good way. Now, some of those stories were actual accounts of historical events, and others were pure fantasy, usually created to teach some type of lesson or moral. But legends, on the other hand, legends were created in an attempt to explain things that really weren't understood by the ancient ones. Things like, what is thunder? Or where does lightning come from? Because there were no scientists to explain these things, it was only logical for them to assume that it came from some type of a bird. And so they envisioned a great giant bird living high above the clouds. And when it would fly, its wings would make the sound of thunder. And when it was angry, lightning would flash from its eyes. And so was born the legend of the Thunderbird. Legends, like stories, can also contain lessons or morals, but usually a bit more subtle. An example of this type of legend is the story of the medicine bear. And it tells us that long, long ago, in the beginning times, Bear was a great healer. He knew all the plants, roots, and barks that would cure sickness and heal injury. He was the first medicine man. And the people honored and respected Bear. But then came the summer of little rain, the crops did not grow. The rivers and streams were drying, there were no fish. The game animals were scarce. And in their hunger, the people abandoned their sacred ways and hunted Bear for food. But when they tried to cook him, his ashes went into the sky and became mosquitoes. Now that legend was an attempt by the ancient ones to explain the origins of a rather annoying little insect. But if we look deeper into the story, it is telling us that when we abandon our beliefs and turn our backs on those things that we hold sacred, no good will ever come of it. It's also reminding us that the consequences of our actions will be felt for generations to come. And so whenever you have the opportunity to sit with a storyteller, listen to their stories, listen to what they're saying, you may just discover a small pearl of wisdom.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that little video as much as I did. I wanted to thank Jason for sharing that with us. And I was saying that I think it really lays the groundwork really well for the conversation we want to have with Jason today. I just want to mention to everyone that there is a Q&A available and a chat. And Rock and myself will keep an eye, and we will feed the questions to Jason as they come up. I invite the classes to go ahead and share their questions. We've really enjoyed the conversation with these classes so far this week. And on that note, I'll pass it over to you, Jason.
Thank you, Madeline. And thank you all. I hope you enjoyed the videos, but now to something that's near and dear to my heart, because I am one of the gifts that was granted to me was storytelling, and it's something very near and dear to me because as a Nihio or as a Cree person, my way of learning has always been within that traditional way of learning. So it's within the oral tradition. So what an oral tradition means is that all our teachings and all our learnings and all our traditions are passed by word of mouth, by listening and talking to one another. What I've developed and what I've found myself is that as somebody who learned in the oral tradition, I have what's called a vocal memory or a oral memory, which means that every time I retell a story or remember a story or a moment or talking with somebody, I can actually picture myself in the same place that I was when I was given that teaching or when I was taught that story. So every story that's been handed down to me, I can remember being told that story and I can remember the words. I can remember the sounds. I can remember the smells of those stories from when they were taught to me. So when I do retell those stories, I try to tell them in the same way that they were taught to me, using that voice that I hear in my head from the person that was telling me the story. It's quite humbling to be a storyteller, and it's sometimes it's a little bit. I feel a little bit of pressure because with each story that was told to me, it was kind of like an obligation. That means that it's my job now to remember that story as it was told and to pass that story on. So now I'm going to be giving you a job because with each of the stories I'm going to tell, it's your job now that I'm passing it to you to remember that story and more importantly, to pass that story down in some way. So I can only talk about storytelling within my culture, which is the Nihio culture, which is the Cree culture. I know different nations have different forms of storytelling. They have stories that differ a little bit. But like I said before, what I found is our stories are also very similar but from nation to nation. However, I'm going to tell the stories that were passed to me from a Cree point of view or from the Cree Nation culture. So within Cree culture, there are actually times when we're told we can or should be telling stories, and more importantly, there are times when we shouldn't be telling stories, and there's actually a really good reason for that. Within the Cree culture, our storytelling season begins when the first snow falls. So that's coming up here shortly. We'll be moving into storytelling season. So as long as there's snow on the ground, we can tell stories within Cree culture. That's when we're told that's the time for sharing stories. And if you really think about it, there's a really good reason for this. Because if you think about the way our world works, and especially the way our sun and our moon interact with our living world here, you'll notice that already the days are getting shorter, the nights are getting longer as we move into that whole fall winter season, where we're getting less and less sunlight throughout the day. And we know right up to the winter solstice of December 21st, it's going to get shorter and shorter days. So if you think back to generations and generations back, they didn't have TVs, they didn't have iPads, they didn't have TikTok, they didn't have Instagram, they didn't have any of that. In fact, they didn't have any lights or anything like that, or the comforts we enjoy today, electricity. They had none of that. So how do you think they would spend all these hours of darkness when the nights were long? None of the distractions that we have today. Well, one of the biggest ways they do that was through storytelling. That was their entertainment. And not only entertainment, but that was the way they shared their teachings and shared their stories and passed the culture and teachings down from generation to generation. Because if you can think of shutting off everything in your house, all of the lights, all of your devices and TVs, and just shutting it all off uh, an evening, and just sit there for an hour and really think about what's going on inside your head, and you'll start to see that you'll probably start to maybe remember a song that you heard, or start to think about a movie that you watched, or start to think about a game that you were playing, but that'll play inside your head. This is the very same thing that goes on with storytelling. So that's something I'd like you to try one of these evenings. Just shut everything off for an hour and sit there and see what comes into your mind. And you'll be able to sort of relive that experience that our ancestors did as you let your mind lead you. So this is what storytelling is all about. It's creating those experiences, creating those pictures in our minds of these stories from long, long ago. So these are like almost like movies that have been passed down from generation to generation that play in our head. And I know when I'm telling or listening to stories, I'm seeing it in my mind and I'm watching that almost like a movie.
Jason,
Even
I'm going to jump in there because I think what you're saying right now aligns perfectly with the first question we've received.
all
And
right.
it's from Hamlin's class, and they want to know what they can do during a storytelling besides listening. So I think that's where you're heading, creating those images in their head. And
Yes, yes, very much so. So that's what you can do while I'm telling the story. Remember when I was taught these stories, a lot of them were years ago because when I grew up, we didn't have any power. We had our wood stove going. I lived in a house, but we didn't have any power. But we had the wood stove going, so all the basic sound we always heard was the crackling of the fire. But most of all, we didn't have any lights on. So maybe try turning off the lights because that will take that distraction away from you, taking away that background noise that we're always hearing, this these devices going, these phones that are going, these even the buzzing. If you're in your house, you can hear the buzzing of the electricity. Even that is distracting to us. So try doing that, shutting out the lights, focusing on the sound of the story being told. So, like I said, for us as Nihil, as Nihiwak, as Cree peoples, storytelling season is when there's snow on the ground, and that's just because of the long nights. And even now in Canada here, February has actually been recognized as Indigenous Storytelling Month. So mark that down in your calendar and make it a point to try and remember that February is Indigenous Storytelling Month here in Canada, because of course that's going to be one of our coldest months, and it's a time when we're probably going to all be inside most of the time. So what better time to share stories and these legends from generations past? Now, within Cree culture, there are actually three major types of stories. The first one is creation stories. There are actually three types of creation stories. There are creation about nature, creation of our earth or our land, and creation of animals, or how animals came to be. So with creation of nature, those stories tell all about, say, the story of the birch tree and how the birch tree came to be the way the birch tree looks. Stories of our land, they tell stories of how our land or our earth came to be. Stories about the creation of animals tell about how animals came to be, either the way they act or even the way they look. Those are the creation stories. The other major type of story that's told in Nihiawiwin or Cree ways of being are star stories. And these stories tell all about what the meanings are for the stars. We know them now as constellations, the Big Dipper, Orion, and Orion's Belt. But as Cree peoples, we had stories. We didn't call them Orion or the Big Dipper or the Little Dipper. We had our own names for these constellations. And along with those names, there is a story for each star formation out there. So the third major type of story, and this is a really major one, is our trickster stories. Now, with our trickster stories, within Cree culture or within the Cree language, trickster actually has a name. But unfortunately, right now, I can't say his name. That goes with the teachings that I was given, where I am not allowed to say trickster's name unless there's snow on the ground. And I've had elders approach me before and say, well, if you lay down tobacco or if you lay down sage, you can say his name. However, in order for me to stay true to the teachings that I was given, I was taught I can't say his name in any way unless there's snow on the ground. So I like to stay true to the teachings that I was given, all about trickster. So when there's not snow on the ground like now, I just say trickster. Hopefully you'll get to find out what his name is in Cree uh, as soon as there's snow on the ground. But for now, I call him trickster. And with trickster, there's actually, it's almost like a trilogy or a series where there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of trickster stories, and it follows like a series. The beginning, the first trickster story, and then the adventures of trickster as he goes through his life on or his time here amongst two-leggeds. But they are funny stories. They're learning stories, and within those trickster stories, there's all of these other creation stories and star stories, but they're uh, the main character in those trickster stories are trickster. But like I said, right now I can't say trickster's name. So what we're gonna do right now is I'm gonna tell you a story from each of these areas. So I'm going to tell you a creation story, a legend, and then a star legend, and then a trickster legend. So hopefully you're prepared to listen carefully, because remember, as a storyteller, it's my job, and one that I take seriously, that I need to pass these stories on to someone. So you'll really lift my heart if you listen carefully and remember these stories so that you could tell them. So the first story is a creation story, and this creation story I'm going to tell you is about the creation of our land or or our continent here. So Kayas, long ago, as Nihiawak, as Cree people, we're told that Creator was looking down on the land he had created all the land, all the people, all the animals, but Creator wasn't happy because people were fighting each other, and they were lying to each other, and they were hurting each other, and they were gossiping to each other, and doing all these things they shouldn't be doing. So Creator thought, well, this isn't right. We're going to start over here because I don't like the way the animals are acting or the way the people are acting. So Creator decided we're going to have to start fresh, start all over. So a great rain started, and it rained and it rained and it rained for days and days. And finally all of the land started to disappear, and all of the trees and everything was getting covered by water. Now the animals were starting to panic here because they didn't know what was going on, and their land was getting smaller and smaller as the water was getting higher and higher. But Trickster had sort of saw what was coming. So he cut down this huge tree, and as soon as he felled that tree, he jumped on it to use it as a boat. So he jumped onto this tree, and he started helping all the animals, calling just the animals, "Come on, Ustum, come get on this tree with me. You'll be safe on this tree." So as the waters grew higher and higher, the log was getting fuller and fuller with all of these animals that Trickster was trying to save, because he called them his brothers and his sisters. All the beavers, all the moose, all the buffalo, they were climbing onto the log, and he was getting as many as he could onto the log. And it continued to rain and rain and rain until finally there wasn't a speck of land anywhere on our Mother Earth. So, of course, the animals on the log with Trickster were starting to get worried because they started to think, well, everything's gone. What are we going to eat? How are we going to survive? There's no plants here for us to eat for the plant eaters, and we can't have the meat eaters start eating anyone on this log because we're supposed to look after each other on here because we're all that's left. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And some of them were crying, some of them were fainting because they were thinking about, oh no, we're going to float on this log for days and days until we starve to death. But Trickster was wise, and he thought about this for a while, and he said, you know what? My brothers, my sisters, I can I can make land again, but I need the help of somebody because I need a handful of dirt. So all the animals started looking all over the log, looking for a handful of dirt. And to their despair, they were all sad, and they said, oh, there's no dirt on this log. What are we going to do? So Trickster thought a little bit more, and he thought, well, you know what? Wait, we have really good swimmers here on this log. If one of you swimmers could dive down, I'm sure if you dive down far enough, you could bring back a handful of earth to me, and then I can make land with it. So all of the animals were looking at each other. Some were sort of putting their head down, looking away shy. Nobody really wanted to do it. Finally, Umps, the beaver, puffed up his chest because Umps, the beaver, is kind of an arrogant little fella, and he said, "Well, I could do this. I'm a beaver. I live in the water. This is an easy job for me. I'll swim down and get a handful of dirt. No problem." Puffed up his chest, he went to the edge of the log and he jumped in the water. Took one deep breath, and down he went, swimming as fast as he could, pushing as hard as he could, and he pushed deeper and deeper. Finally, he could feel he was running out of breath. He could see little flashes of light in his eyes because he was holding his breath for so long, but he went deeper and deeper. Finally, he thought, oh, my lungs are burning. I feel like I'm going to pass out. And he turned around and he swam back up as quick as he can, and he barely made it to the top. of the where the up top of the water, and he took a deep breath and he almost fainted and he barely made it back to the log. The other animals and Trickster saw him come up and they looked at him and they quickly pulled him onto the log. Well, Beaver, did you get the handful of dirt? Looked at them, still out of breath, and he said, well, no, I couldn't make it. It's too far. Nobody can do it. I'm one of the best swimmers and divers here. I couldn't do it. I couldn't make it. We're all doomed. We're gonna die on this log. Again, the animals started crying and some fainted and they were all worried and they were wondering, what are we gonna do? Finally, Makwa, the loon, stood up and said, hey, I'm a sleek bird. I can dive deep, deep when I'm hunting. So I can easily fly up high in the air and dive deep and fast, and I'll get that handful of dirt. Oh, everyone breathed a sigh of relief and thought, okay, Makwa, the loon is going to do this for us. Oh, Makwa puffed up his chest and quickly flew as high as he could. Once he got as high as he could, he turned around and he dove with his sleek body and his sleek beak. Didn't even make a splash as he went in the water. That's how sleek he was. And quickly he went down, swimming, pushing as fast as he could to try and get a handful of dirt. He made it past where the beaver had went, and he kept swimming and pushing and pushing and pushing. Finally, Makwa started seeing little stars in his eyes and started feeling the burning in his lungs. And he thought, well, I'm starting to get worried. I don't know if I can do this. And he kept feeling like he needed to take a deep breath and he kept pushing and pushing and he started to see black spots like he was going to faint. Finally, Makwa turned around and started quickly pushing himself to the top. He barely made it out of the water and he was nearly passing out. The other animals had to grab Makwa and pull him back onto the log. They said, oh, Makwa, did you get the earth? The handful of earth? Makwa took a minute to catch his breath and he said, oh, my brothers, my sisters, I'm sorry, I couldn't do it. It's too far. It's impossible. Nobody can do it. I'm one of the best divers and I couldn't do it. Nobody can do this. We're doomed. We're going to die on this log. All of us. And everyone started crying again. And even Trickster was starting to get worried, thinking, oh, this is never going to work. Well, we might be in trouble here. Finally, out of all the commotion of the animals crying and getting worried, What's the muskrat, was waving his little hand and he had a little voice and he was saying, hey, everyone, I can do it. I can do it. And he had such a small voice that nobody really heard the muskrat. And they sort of didn't pay attention to him. Finally, he hollered a little louder, hey, everyone, I can do it. Finally, the beaver could hear the muskrat. And started laughing and said, hey, everybody. And everybody started listening. And you could see poor little Wettusk sitting there kind of embarrassed, kind of holding his little hands together. And look, hey, everyone, look, said. Wettusk here, this muskrat thinks he could do it. Oh, and everybody, all the other animals just started laughing to themselves and pointing. Oh, this little muskrat, this little Wettusk thinks he can dive deeper than Makwa and dive deeper than Ums. Oh, that's hilarious. Finally, Trickster had enough of it, and Trickster stepped in and said, wait, Kaya, stop it, my brothers and sisters. I don't see anyone else stepping up and offering to try. Wettusk at least is offering to try. We're going to let him try because he's the only one offering. If you're not offering to try, you have no right to laugh. You just sit there quiet and you let Wettusk try. So Wettusk, still feeling a little embarrassed, smiled and went walking to the edge of the log, got to the edge of the log, and he stumbled and he fell in the water. Again, everyone started laughing. Trickster said, Kaya, don't laugh. Everyone was trying hard not to laugh. And Wettusk came back up out of the water even looking more embarrassed than before, and he kind of swam around a little. And if you've ever seen Wachuk, he looks a little clumsy in the water. And Wachuk smiled, and he took a deep breath, and he dove. At first, he was having trouble going because he's not a super good diver, but he can dive. And he started having a hard time pushing his little legs down into the water. But he kept on going, and he pushed and he pushed and he pushed. And it wasn't long before Wachuk started to see the stars in his eyes because he was getting out of breath, and started to feel his lungs hurting a little bit from holding his breath so long. But he made it up to where Ump's kid, and little Wachuk was proud of this, and he kept on pushing and pushing. And now he could see black spots along with the flashing in his eyes, and he thought, oh, I'm gonna faint here. And his little lungs were starting to burn. But Wachuk thought, I'm gonna push a little bit further. And Wachuk kept on pushing and pushing, pushing clumsily through the water. And Wachuk made it to where Makwa did, the loon. Oh, little Wachuk was proud of this and thought, I made it up to here. But already his eyes were going black, and he could feel that he was going to faint. But he still kept on pushing and pushing. His lungs were on fire, and he was starting to pass out. But he kept on pushing and pushing. The other animals up on the log, they were still sort of laughing about Wachuk wanting to try. And finally, their laughter turned to worry, and they started to look around. Well, where is Wachuk? Wachuk should have already came up by now. Where is he? And now they all started getting very worried. Even Trickster was worried. And he said to his brothers and sisters, what did we do? Maybe we shouldn't have let him try. Everyone, look everywhere in the water. See if you can find Wachuk. He should have been up long time ago. After a while of looking, everybody was looking out on the water, looking near the log to see if they could find Wachuk. Finally, somebody noticed this little thing floating in the water. And Umps said, hey, I see something over there. It looks like it might be Wachuk. Quickly dove into the water, swam as quick as he could, hollered to the others, yes, it's Wachuk. Go bring him back. Quick, we need to get him on the log. And they pulled Wachuk onto the log. Immediately, Trickster one grabbed Wachuk in his hand, and he was looking at poor little muskrat, listening and looking for a sign of life. Finally, Trickster looked at his brothers and sisters, the other animals, sadly, and said, I'm sorry, my brothers and sisters. Wachuk is gone. He didn't make it. He went too far in the water, and he couldn't do it. And why did we let him do this? Why did we let him give up his life trying to save us? Why did we do this? Oh, poor little Wachuk. And as Trickster was looking down at Wachuk, he noticed Wachuk's little claw was clenched tightly. Trickster immediately started to open his little claw. And to his amazement, there was a handful of dirt there. Trickster quickly took the dirt and said, my brothers and sister, Wachuk did it. He brought a handful of dirt. So Trickster said a special prayer and used the power of Uten, the wind, and he blew this dirt out onto the water. Soon as the handful of dirt hit the water, first a little island started poking up. Then it grew bigger and bigger and bigger and stretched farther and farther and farther and farther until it was this huge continent, huge piece of land had sprung up out of the water. Trickster continued to hold Wachuk, and they pushed themselves toward this new land that had sprung up. And he turned to the other animals on the log and he said, wait, absolutely nobody is going to step foot on this land, this new land that has sprung up from the gift that Wachuk has given us. The first one to go on to this new land is going to be Wachuk, because he's the one who sacrificed his life for all of us. So Trickster stepped off the log and took Wachask onto the land and laid him on the land. And he turned to the other animals and he said, I want every one of you, every living being from this day forward to remember that even though Wachask was the smallest and weakest of all of us, he had the biggest heart and he was the bravest because he gave his life so we could all live. And remember this for years. Never judge anybody by their size or their strength. Judge them by the strength in their heart, like Wachask. And this lesson can never be forgotten. And the sacrifice that Wachask did for us. So all of the animals put their heads down as they came onto the land, and they remembered this story and passed it down. Even when the two-leggeds came, the story was told to them to pass down from generation to generation, just as I'm passing this story down to you now, and the legend of Wachask, Uksamaga. So that is the end of that story.
Jason, you are a wonderful storyteller. I want to remind classes that the Q&A is open if they have any questions for Jason, but I see we're getting lots of hearts and claps and people really enjoyed, as I did. It was very easy to do the visualization in our mind with the great way you told the story. So thank you for the first story from our creator.
You are very welcome to everyone who heard that story. And like I said, it would honor me greatly if you'd remember that story and pass it down. It'll fulfill my obligation as a storyteller to hand these stories down. So you do me a great honor by remembering that story. So that was an example of a creation story about our land and how our land was created. And if you remember in the video, when the elder was talking about the origin of a lot of these stories and how they came to be, you think about what was going through our ancestors' minds. They didn't have Google. They didn't have a Google search that they could go to and say, "Oh, I want to know how where a birch tree comes from," or "I want to know how where the Big Dipper came from." They didn't have a Google search. So often what would happen, like was said in the video, is they'd sit there and they'd think hard about it and they'd think, how did that poplar tree come to be? Why does it have those spots on it? And without an answer, often they'd create a legend or a story that explains that. Because as two-leggeds, as humans, we're very inquisitive and curious. We always want to know things. So why is this like that? Why do the stars shine? Why are the stars shaped like that? So often they would use these stories to explain that. So you see the way the story of Wachask is, and it talks about how our our land here in Canada came to be, and our ancestors thought, well, this is a beautiful story to explain how our land came to be. So now we're going to switch gears a bit, and I'm going to tell you a star legend. And this, like I said, these are stories that tell about the constellations, how the stars in our skies were formed. And this story is about a special formation of stars that I think once we get to the end of the story, you'll all have a good idea of which stars I'm talking about. So Kayas, long ago, even before all the two-leggeds or all the humans were on the land, the animals were the main beings on this land. However, there was one family of two-leggeds that were put on this land first, and one of them was Trickster. But however, Trickster at that time was early to when Trickster came to be. So he hadn't learned a lot and he wasn't as wise. He had just started walking on our land. And at this time in the trilogies of Trickster, Mahigan, the wolf had agreed to Creator that he would follow Trickster and teach him and watch over him and protect him and help him to survive and teach him the ways to survive. So Mahigan the wolf, this was his job at that time. So Mahigan would take Trickster and he would teach him how to snare or how to hunt and which medicines to pick and how to build shelters and how to build a teepee and everything. So Mahigan would teach him this, and they went everywhere together. And they had this particular area that they would go hunting in, and they would go hunting and hunting and every day in that area. However, one particular day in the spring, near their hunting trail, a bird or a family of or a pair of birds had actually built a nest, and they were going about nesting there and laying their eggs, and it had been later in the spring to the time when the babies were to be born. And Mayagan and Trickster were walking to their hunting trail and they happened to pass this tree. But on this particular day, Trickster heard something. He could hear this little peeping sound, peep, 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 peep. And he stopped and he looked up at this tree and he looked up at this nest there. And he could see some little heads poking out there. And before this, Trickster had never seen babies or anything like that. So he didn't know anything about this. And he stopped and he looked and he looked at Mayagan. He said, Mayagan, what is that? What are those little things in that nest there beside those two big birds there? What are those things? Mayagan looked around, he looked up at the nest and he said, Oh, Trickster, those are babies. Mayagan, Trickster was just amazed and he looked up and babies? What are babies? What are those little things? Mayagan thought about how am I going to explain this one to him, and Mayagan finally said, "You know what? When two big birds like that, a male and a female, sometimes they get lonely and they decide that they want to have babies. So they get together and they make babies, which is basically little copies of themselves, but tiny. They start out tiny and they'll grow up and they'll eventually be like the mother and the father." Trickster was kind of confused, but he thought, that's amazing. That's amazing how that happens. Oh, Creator is truly amazing to allow this to happen. This is neat. And he smiled and they kept on walking down their hunting trail. But every day from there forward, when they'd walk by the tree, Trickster would always look up and he'd see these little heads poking out of the nest. They were getting bigger and bigger. Finally, they were looking like their parents. Trickster was completely amazed. He thought, "Oh, that's so neat. That's amazing." And it always brightened up his day, and he'd walk away smiling, shaking his head. Babies, that's neat. Now, Mayagan had been walking with Trickster for many moons, and finally Mayagan started to look up at the babies, and he started thinking, I'm starting to feel a little lonely, and I wish I had some babies of my own too, because all I ever see is Trickster here, and I'm getting a little tired of just seeing him. So that night, Mahigan prayed to Creator and said, "Oh, Creator, I wish I had a partner, and I'd like to have babies of my own, and have someone else to take care of besides Trickster." So that night, Trickster granted Mahigan a partner, a mate. And Mahigan was so happy about this. And before long, uh, Mahigan had some babies of his own. Now, Trickster had heard about this and he went to go see Mahigan. He was so happy for Mahigan. "Oh, my brother, Mahigan, you got some babies of your own. Oh, look how cute they are. They look just like you, but they're real tiny. Oh, this is so beautiful. Oh, I'm so happy for you." Although Mahigan the wolf was really happy, he started to get worried, thinking, well, you know what? I've got all my babies here I've got to take care of. I'm worried I won't have time to take care of Trickster because I haven't taught him everything that he should know. And in the evening, Trickster went home to his teepee because he knew Mayagan was busy with his family. And Trickster sat there and he started feeling lonely. And Mayagan, the wolf, knew that this was going to happen, and he started weighing heavy on his mind. And Mayagan started thinking, Trickster should have a partner too. He can't be left alone. He's probably sad and lonely. So again, Mahigan prayed to Creator and said, "Oh, Creator, can you please give Trickster a mate or a partner so that he won't be so sad and lonely?" So again, Creator had heard and listened and granted Trickster a mate. So again, Trickster was happy again. He had this new partner that he could talk with and hunt with and share things with. And it wasn't very long before Trickster had a baby of his own. And Trickster was just amazed and so in love with his new little baby. And he would hold the baby and rock them. He was just so happy to have this little baby to take care of. However, Trickster was still young on this land, started to get on towards winter, and it started to get colder, and the snow started to fall. And Trickster had found that he'd been so busy taking care of his new partner and his baby that he hadn't had time to hunt and get all the food that he should have. Mahigan had heard of this, the wolf, and he started getting worried. He said, "Well, I know that Trickster and his family, they've been busy with taking care of this baby. I heard that he wasn't hunting. They're not going to make it through the winter if they don't get enough food." And Mahigan was right because Trickster was already sitting at home. They were low on food, so the baby wasn't getting enough milk. His partner wasn't eating enough, and the baby was crying all the time. And Trickster was sitting there thinking, "Oh, what am I going to do? We're not going to make it through the winter. The winter just started. Oh no, what are we going to do?" Mahigan finally decided, "I'm going to have to do something." And he went over to Trickster's teepee and he called Trickster out. "Trickster, Astam, Dalmachi, we're going to go hunting." So Trickster happily followed Mahigan because Trickster was at that time was actually not a very good hunter. He wasn't a very good tracker or hunter. And almost immediately, Mahigan, the wolf, picked up the trail of Pascualmustos, the buffalo, and they started following it. And it wasn't long before they caught up to this huge bull, Pascualmustos, this huge buffalo bull. Mahigan told Trickster, "Okay, take your time and make sure your arrow flies true." So, of course, Trickster was already hungry and nervous, but he managed to take down the buffalo. And with Mahigan's help, they they cut it up and they put it in Trickster's sled and they drug it to Trickster's camp. Trickster was so happy and he couldn't stop thanking Mahigan for helping him. Mahigan proudly went back to his family to take care of his babies. But at Trickster's camp, Trickster started thinking, I'm going to have to do something here. I can't, I'm so grateful to Mayagan. So he took all of the choice, the best pieces, the fattest steaks, the softest, tenderest meat, the tongue, the most delicacies out of the entire Pascualmustos, the whole buffalo, and he put them onto a sled and he took them to Mayagan. And he told Mayagan, "My brother, I'm so happy, so thankful how you helped us. I'm bringing you the best parts of the buffalo for your family because I'm so grateful. And this is how we show we're grateful. We're giving you the best pieces and not keeping the best for ourselves." Mahigan was happy for Trickster's gift. And as Trickster walked away, Mahigan had some tears coming down his eyes because he was so touched by this. Mahigan decided, well, these two-leggeds, they can't take care of themselves. They need somebody to take care of them. And I'm too busy with my family, but I'm going to make sure we do something about this. So Mahigan called a meeting of the dog family, and that's the wolves, the foxes, and the coyotes. So he called the meeting of these three, the wolves, the coyotes, and the foxes, the leaders from these families. And they had a meeting, and at that meeting, Mahigan the wolf told the others, my brother, fox and coyote, we need to do something. These two-leggeds, they can't take care of themselves. We need to do something so that they have somebody to walk with them and take care of them and protect them and teach them and love them and watch over them. Will you, my two brothers, will you agree to give up one of your pups to go and live with these two-leggeds and watch over them? So they all agreed, the wolf, the coyote, and the fox, and each one of them gave up one of their pups to sacrifice to go live and walk with the two-leggeds or walk with men and women. Now Creator had been watching over what was going on, and Creator was so touched by the gift that the wolf, the fox, and the coyote had given, that Creator said, I'm going to mark this in the skies for all eternity so people will never forget what happened on this day when the wolf, the coyote, and the fox gave up one of their own children to go take care of and watch over and be companions to the two-leggeds. And Creator marked it in the sky with stars representing the wolf, the coyote, and the fox. And one pup was sent out to each of the four corners. And these pups that were sent out to the four corners of the earth are marked in those skies as well. One for the north, the pup that was sent north, the pup that was sent to the east, the pup that was sent to the south, and the pup that was sent to the west. So Creator put these stars in the sky so this story will never be forgotten. And today we know these stars as our Big Dipper. And the pups that were sent out to walk with us, take care of us, be our friends, be our companions, be our protectors, we know now as dogs. So this is the story of the Big Dipper and how dogs came to be with us here on earth, to walk with us as our friends. So now you know the story of Mahigan and Trickster and how dogs came to be. Samaga.
Well, here come the hearts and the applause again. Another beautiful story and a great way. Lots of great ways to explain and to deepen our understandings of the world around us, the sky above us. Beautiful, beautiful stories, Jason. I want to remind you that it's 10:15. Your stories are just fantastic. And I'm not sure how long your last one will be, but I don't see any questions coming up for this one. I have one that I'm saving for you at the end of the session. So on that, I will pass it over to you to share your third.
Yes, and don't worry, Madeline, I had it all perfectly timed out. So
I have no doubt, Jason.
I have definitely got to teach you our Cree term of Kiam. So say Kiam with me, Madeline.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what Kiam means? Don't worry about it.
Hey, I'm
So
not.
so with that, I'm going to continue on with our last story. And remember, the last set of stories, although the last one was a trickster story, the main theme of that story was the creation of the Big Dipper and why we see the Big Dipper. So that is actually classified as a star story. This next one is specifically a trickster story, and it teaches a lot of the trickster stories teach about how we should act, or more importantly, how we shouldn't act. Because Trickster got his name Trickster for a reason, because he tended to do a lot of things that he wasn't supposed to do. And as a result of that, things change. So this story is about that. And this is another story about Trickster. And we come to Trickster now later on in his life when he's already gone through tons and tons of adventures. But at this point in the trilogy of Trickster, he had came across this old kokom, or this old grandmother who had lost all of her family and she was alone to take care of herself. So at this point in Trickster's trilogy, Trickster had decided to stay with this kokom and take care of her. So he decided, I'm going to live with this kokom, and she's going to become Nochum. Nochum is my grandmother. So he decided, this is Nochum now. I'm gonna take care of her and hunt for her and haul wood for her and do all of the work for her. And he adopted her as his grandmother. So on this particular day, he was sitting with his kochum, his grandmother, and they were doing the things they normally do. But on this day, it was later in the fall, his kochum turned to him and said, Trickster, it's almost time to move camp because it's the fall now. The moose are calling and it's time to start hunting moose. We got to move to our fall moose camp. So tomorrow we're going to have to pack up our teepee and we'll move to the moose camp so we can hunt for our moose for the fall. Trickster said, okay, no, we'll start packing up. I'll start packing up tonight and then tomorrow we could get going early. I'll take the teepee down tomorrow, wapake, and then we can leave right away. Nochum looked at Trickster and said, no, you know the way it goes. I'm the one who moves the teepee. That's my job. That's always been the job of the women. We move the teepee. Trickster didn't like this. He thought, oh, no, Kokum's, my Nochum, she's real bony and she's only 4 feet tall. And how is she? Well, I can't expect her to move this big teepee on her own. It's not going to work. So he told his kokum. No, no, I'll move the teepee. I know women usually move the teepee, but tomorrow, no, I'm gonna move it. The other women, they have families with them to help them, and they're young and strong. But no, you don't need to be doing this hard work. I'll do it tomorrow. Again, Nochum looked at him and said, No, Trickster, we're not gonna change the way things are. It's my job to move the teepee. I'll move the teepee. Oh, Trickster finally gave in and he thought, well, okay, it's okay, whatever. If you want to do it, fine. Trickster hadn't slept well that night because it was bothering him all night, thinking, how's this 4 foot tall, skinny little kochum gonna move this teepee? But he said, I'm gonna let her worry about that, and I'll let her try at least, and then I'll come back and move it. So he got up, he packed up all the other stuff, their bedding and their cooking stuff and their hunting stuff, and he started taking this huge load because Kochum had told him, you haul everything on ahead and I'll bring the teepee. Trickster still didn't like this, so he packed up everything in a huge bundle, started walking towards their moose camp. But he didn't go far before he went and hid behind this pile of willows, thinking, well, I want to see what Nochum's gonna do. I want to see what my grandmother's gonna do here. How is she gonna do this with this teepee? This is gonna be fun to watch. And he was peeking out from behind the willows watching. All of a sudden he could hear this drum going. And he could hear this song being sung. Hey, and it was his Nochum. grandmother was just walking, drumming on a drum and singing this song. Trickster thought, well, what's this crazy Nochum doing now? What's a she's crazy. Why is she just drumming along and singing when she's supposed to be taking this teepee? And Trickster is trying hard not to laugh at Nochum. So, but he kept quiet and kept on watching. And to his amazement, he looked and he could see this teepee dancing behind Nochum as she was singing and drumming. This teepee was dancing on its poles, following Nochum. Trickster thought, this is amazing. That's how these women move those teepees with that song and the drum. And immediately he stood up in his excitement. And soon as he stood up, the teepee stopped moving, stopped in its tracks, and didn't move even 1 inch. Nochum was still drumming, and she looked back, didn't see the teepee, and she stopped, wondering, what's going on? How come this teepee stopped? And then she saw Trickster just standing up there, just smiling and just amazed. Oh, little Kochum, his grandmother, was angry. Trickster, what are you doing? Why are you sitting there watching? I told you, you were supposed to be walking ahead. You weren't supposed to come back and watch this. Trickster's come running out to his Kochum. No, Kochum, but I gotta know. I have to know, teach me this song so I can do that. Nochum looked down, shook her head. Trickster, you don't realize what you just did. This was a gift that was given to all women. This drum's beat, this song was handed down for only for women to hear and only women to know because it's our teepee song that brings our teepee with us. No man is ever supposed to hear this song. And we were told that if any man ever hears this song, that gift will be taken from us. Trickster couldn't believe it. He said, really? Let me try singing. And he tried following the words and the beat, and Teepee wouldn't move. His Kochum shook her head and said, well, Trickster, see, you've ruined it. Because of your curiosity, being curious and not listening to what was told to you, you've taken this gift away from all of us now. So from now on, from here on, because that song was taken from us, it's now going to be the men's job to take down that teepee and carry those teepee poles and teepee coverings because you've taken that gift from us. And this is the way it's going to be from now until the end of time. You men have to do this, take that teepee down and haul it on your backs. Trickster put his head down, shaking it. Oh, if only I had listened. So now you know the story of Trickster and how the teepee song was taken from us. Uksamada.
Thank you, Jason. You really do have a great ability to tell stories. I was thinking, could I retell your 3 stories? I think the first and the third. The second one, I might have to listen to it a second time, but you really, you set the scene so nicely for us, helped us in reminding us to create those images in our minds. And I think that the stories that you told show us how throughout humanity, no matter what culture, we all create our belief systems, but everybody, the most important thing is looking after the earth and looking after each other.
Yes. And I think if there's anything I'd like you to take away today from listening to the stories and hearing about storytelling, Indigenous storytelling, is that you would do all storytellers a great justice if you can remember even one of those stories and pass it down. And in fact, I've got a task for you. Your task now is to either draw one of the stories you heard or retell in writing one of the stories you've heard. And I'd love it if some of you could get back to me and retell me that story either through a picture or uh, through writing. And maybe Madeline can just put my email in in the chat for you all, and especially teachers. I'd love to hear from your students or see their works from one of those stories. Because remember, story is all about creating those pictures not only in our mind, but being able to put that picture in our mind to paper.
I have added your email to the chat, and I have been saving a question for you. Someone asked, how many stories have you told?
How many stories have I told? You know what? I've talked at length with elders, especially these past few years, because what I'm finding is we're losing a lot of our elders who carry these stories. And I myself, it always bothers me that maybe there's a story that I'm forgetting or one that I might not remember quite so well. So I asked my elders, can I write them down? Because in the oral tradition, we're told not to write them. We're supposed to keep them uh, told through our telling them. But now elders are saying, you know what, we need to have them written down. So I have started writing them down. I started out by writing the titles of all of the stories I know. And right now it's up to 65 different legends that I've remembered. And it amazed me too. I had no idea there were that many legends that I remembered. So I think it pays deep respect to the storytellers that told me the stories because they told those stories in such a way that they were left with me. And there were stories that I've forgotten from the early years when I was younger, and my Musum and Kukum, my grandmother and grandfather were telling me some of these stories. I've forgotten some. And I remember being young and it bothered me. And I told this to my grandfather, my Musum. I said, Musum, it really bothers me. I can't remember some of the stories you told. And I remember I could see my Muslim's face and I could hear his words when he said he laughed and he told me Kiam knows him. He said, you know what? The stories you've forgotten or can't remember, those stories weren't meant for you. They were meant for somebody else to remember. Said, but the stories that you do remember, those were given to you to remember and pass down. So that made me feel better after that. So I don't worry about forgetting stories because in my mind, I've done my job with those stories and somebody else has been gifted, has been tasked with carrying those stories. So that's how storytelling works in Nihiawiwin anyway, in Cree culture.
And thanks, Jason, for that. Just one quick other question. We're wondering when you told me not to worry, Kyum, how do you spell
Yeah,
it?
I'll just put that in the chat here.
Awesome. And as you do that, it's already 10:30. I really did not have to come today. The stories you told, Jason, I think will stick with a lot of us who listen today, and we will cherish those and share those as best we can. So love the challenge you gave to the students today. And your email is there for them to communicate with you and teachers to communicate with you.
Excellent.
Yeah, and kids, you can go home and try and tell your parents one of the stories if you can tonight. And on that, Jason, just I want to thank you. I want to thank everyone for their participation this week. For me, it has been a wonderful week of learning and of reflection. So I thank you for being you were our guide this week. I've placed in the chat the link for Empowering the Spirit. And Empowering the Spirit is where, when we've completed this video, this series this week, the videos will all be placed on the Orange Shirt Day section of Empowering the Spirit. Lesson plans and ideas to go further will also be included. And for those of you working in French immersion or Francophone schools, These videos will be subtitled, available with the resources in French as well. So lots of good things to come. Please do check out our website, and thank you to everyone for taking the time you took this week. And I wish everyone a day tomorrow where we take some time and we do reflect and we remember why we have this National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Any closing words, Jason?
The only closing word I have is Kinanaskom Tinawaka Kiao, which translates as my heart has been lifted by this week and all of the learnings that have gone on, honoring my ancestors. So my heart has been lifted by you all. Kinanaskom Tinawaka Kiao.
Tansy, Jason. Lots of nice thank yous there, Jason. This week has been, with all of you, has been absolutely amazing. Grateful to hear your stories today. And Tammy Diesel said, thank you, Jason. Trickster and Creation is always one of my favorites. And Jason, we'll be in touch next week and do a little debriefing. And I thank you so much.